The envelope was dated March 15th, 1945. But it didn't reach my grandmother's hands until I placed it there 79 years later, in her hospice room. Her fingers trembled as she recognized the handwriting. Lieutenant James Mitchell, the man she'd loved before my grandfather, before my mother was even born. Inside was a ring wrapped in a blood-stained field dressing and 7 words that made her weep. I'm sorry I missed our April wedding. She'd waited at that church anyway, in her mother's ivory dress, while he bled out in a French forest 3,000 miles away. But here's what destroyed me. The letter contained a second page, written by a German medic who tried to save his life, explaining why James refused morphine in his final hour. But let me start from the beginning. I discovered the metal ammunition box in my grandmother Rosa's attic 3 weeks after her 95th birthday. It was pushed behind Christmas decorations, locked with a combination lock whose numbers she'd scratched into the underside of her wedding band. The wedding band from her marriage to my grandfather Frank. Not the wedding that never happened. When I asked her about it over dinner, her face went pale. She made me promise to open it only after she was gone. But then she changed her mind. I'm tired of carrying this alone, she whispered. Open it tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. The box contained 43 letters James had written to her between 1943 and 1945. A photograph of them at Coney Island, dated July the 4th, 1942, and an engagement ring that had never touched her finger. There was also a worn map of France with a single location circled in faded red ink and a Purple Heart medal she'd been sent but never displayed. My grandmother had built an entire life, marriage, children, grandchildren, while keeping this love locked away in ammunition-grade steel. Rose and James had met at a USO dance in Brooklyn when she was 19 and he was 21. He was studying to be a veterinarian. She worked at her father's bakery. In his letters, he called her my Sunday morning, because he wrote, "You're the one thing in this world that makes me believe in grace." They got engaged on Christmas Eve 1943, right before his unit shipped out. The plan was simple. He'd come home in the spring, they'd marry in April, and start their life in a small house upstate, where he'd open a practice treating farm animals. But that's not even the most heartbreaking part. I spent an entire afternoon reading those letters aloud to my grandmother. The early ones were full of hope and terrible jokes. "The food here makes your father's burnt toast look like French cuisine," he wrote in June 1944. But by winter, the tone, in his second-to-last letter, dated March the 10th, 1945, he wrote something that made my grandmother close her eyes. "I'm not the same man who's going to meet you at that altar, Rose. I've seen things that hollowed me out. But I promise I'll spend every day of our marriage finding my way back to the person you loved." The final letter was different. It was written in 2 distinct hands. What I discovered next shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. The first section was James's handwriting, barely legible, written on March 15th during what his unit called the Hagenau operation. "My darling Rose, I'm writing this as fast as I can. We're pinned down and I'm hit bad. Leg, chest, maybe worse. I can't feel my hands anymore. But I need you to know. Marrying you was going to be the best thing I ever did. I'm so sorry I'm missing it. Wear your mother's dress anyway. Find someone who deserves you. Have children. Name your first daughter something beautiful. Live enough for both of us." Then the handwriting changed. The second page was in stilted English. written by someone who'd clearly learned the language in school but never spoke it fluently. My name is Klaus Werner. I am German medic. I find this American soldier in forest after battle. I try to stop bleeding, but he is dying. He refused morphine because he want to be awake to finish letter to you. He make me promise to send this with his things. He show me photograph of you. He say you have smile like his mother. He say April 20th is wedding day. He die at 6:47 post meridian. He say your name at end. I am sorry. This war is wrong. He was good man. I see it in his eyes. My grandmother's hands were shaking so violently, I had to hold the letter for her. I never knew someone tried to save him, she whispered. For 79 years, I thought he died alone. This is where the story takes a turn. The army had sent her a standard telegram in April 1945, confirming James was killed in action. They sent his effects 6 months later, dog tags, a watch, a photograph, and the Purple Heart. But the letter and the ring weren't included. I couldn't understand why. My grandmother explained through tears that she'd always assumed James died instantly, that he'd never had a chance to think of her at the end. She'd married my grandfather Frank in 1948, a kind man who knew about James but never asked her to forget him. She'd had 3 children, 8 grandchildren, 16 great-grandchildren. She'd lived a full life, but every April the 20th, she wore ivory. I became obsessed with finding out what happened to the letter, using the coordinates on James's map and details from his unit records. I contacted a military historian in France. It took 4 months. The French military had stored these items in an archive for decades, unsure what to do with enemy soldier possessions. The historian found James's letter in a box labeled Unclaimed Correspondence. With her help, I had it authenticated, recovered, and finally, delivered. When I gave my grandmother that letter, she read Klaus's words over and over. He wasn't alone, she kept saying. Someone held his hand. Someone cared. She studied the bloodstains on the field dressing that had wrapped the ring. Stains from both James's wounds and Klaus's efforts to save him. This German boy tried to keep him alive, she said. In the middle of all that hate, someone from the other side saw him as human. The truth was buried for a reason, not by cruelty, but by the chaos of war. 3 weeks after I gave her the letter, my grandmother passed away peacefully. Her final request was unusual. She wanted to be buried with both wedding rings, the one Frank had given her and the one James never got, to place on her finger. At her funeral, I read Klaus Werner's words aloud. It turned out Rose had written back to him in 1947 after I helped her find his surviving relatives in Germany. She'd thanked him for trying to save the man she loved. She'd forgiven him for being on the other side. His granddaughter wrote to say Klaus had kept Rose's letter until his death in 1989, that he'd told his children about the American soldier who'd refused morphine to finish a love letter. 2 enemies, connected by a promise kept. My grandmother lived 64 years as Rose Mitchell Turner, hyphenating her names only in private documents I found after her death. She'd loved 2 men completely, one who'd given her dreams and one who'd given her life. Both loves were real. Both men were heroes in their own way. And Klaus, the enemy medic who'd tried to bridge the gap between them all, had carried that night with him forever. The final twist came when we buried her. Inside her casket, alongside both rings, we placed something else. A photograph of James, Frank, and Klaus, side by side, 3 men who'd shaped her life, together at last. A friend had helped me create it, using their military photos, a gift for her journey. Frank had known about James, had loved Rose enough to never make her choose between honoring her past and building her future. That's what real love does. It makes room. If stories like this move you, hit subscribe. We share untold stories of sacrifice every week, the kind that remind us what people endured for the freedoms we take for granted. Ring that notification bell so you never miss these incredible true stories. Drop a comment if someone in your family served, or if you've found letters that changed how you